part 42 of Don't Say Schwarzenegger. This part is sort of a continuance of part 33, which was about Annabella Nicole Driz, who is a close family member of 3 of the attackers' defendants in our case. I've had so much anxiety for the last few days about this part, the second half of this part, so just bear with me. So this is Annabella Nicole Driz, and this is a picture that was on her TikTok, Annabella _. And it's a picture of her with actress and entrepreneur Jessica Alba. And before we get into anything, as far as I know, Jessica Alba is not complicit, she's not corrupt, like nothing like that. That she just, it seems, looking at Annabella's TikTok, that Jessica has been employing her as some sort of an assistant. I believe this picture is them from Milan Fashion Week earlier this year before my series began. So one thing I wanted to point out to Jessica Alba, because there's obviously a lot of people that don't know my story. Yes, it's getting traction the last couple months. A lot of people are seeing it, but there's still so many people that don't know about it. So I wanted to let Jessica Alba know who she has in her personal space. I wanted to remind Jessica, well, not remind because she probably doesn't know about me anyways, but I want to let her know that Annabella, the Annabella Nicole Trust, has had millions of dollars of assets moved into this brand new trust that was created after the lawsuits began in our attempted unalivings and after Annabella's father and uncle's lawsuit began for the underage girl with the schmexual battery charge that she won. So the trust was made in Annabella's name that she signed off on, and all of these millions of dollars, excuse me, like luxury homes and stuff went through this trust. And then all of those homes, this stuff that's supposed to go to the victims, and which by the way, our judgment is now $106 million. It was in the beginning 80 million, unanimous by the jury, but every year it accrues 10%. I'm gonna go over that later. But we haven't been able to collect a dime, Jessica, because a lot of the millions of dollars are sitting in the girl sitting next to you's name. And those millions of dollars have actually been moved, like the assets, the luxury condos that they still live in. I think there's a Manhattan Beach place in it. There's definitely the Beverly Hills condo where the big narcotics bust and the Pew Pew bust happened in 2017, like in Annabella's name. And then since then, and I did a little research in the last 6 months, those assets in her trust were moved to a bunch of different LLCs. And the last time I saw, the last one was maybe a month, six weeks ago, was an LLC called Snow Owl. So if anybody want to look into that, all this stuff is foreign to me and I'm just learning as I go. But this is a real issue, and this person next to you is responsible for helping us, and she's not doing anything. Now, this is not a dig at Jessica, but this is from Jessica Alba's TikTok a few months ago, and she posted on International Women's Day, and I just want to read it out loud so that she can understand the irony of this. Women were silenced, discriminated against, and deprived of their civil rights. It took decades of persistent work and sacrifice by women rights activists to change that. It's a reminder that we've made tremendous progress, but that there's still a distance to go. Oh, I just want to cry right now. Here's just another picture that Annabella posted of her and Jessica traveling the world together. Just another one. Okay, so now let's talk about the second part of this part. This is a document that I wasn't planning on sharing for a while, for at least 15 parts from now when I cover the civil trial. But because of the information I found out this weekend, I felt like I wanted to do it now for not only my followers and everybody watching the series, but for Jessica too, so she knows that I'm not just some random person like on the internet, whatever, that this is serious. Okay, so this document, I had a few documents come into my lap, I guess, and they're character letters of support for not all the defendants, but just Sean Driz. And this one is from Annabella Nicole Driz. Now here's the interesting thing about this. These letters, and I'm not gonna show you them all now, I'm gonna show you the rest of them later, but I'm just gonna show you Annabella's today. These letters weren't for the criminal preliminary hearing that they were all convicted at in 2016. These letters were from 2021 when we were going either before or after, right after the civil trial that we, again, won the largest PTSD settlement of all time, which was about 80 million-ish, which is now 106 million because it goes up 10% every year. So It's very strange, these letters, and I'm not 100, like, they're character letters of support for Sean Driz, all of them for Sean. But it looks to me, and I could be wrong, this is just my opinion, that after reading all of them, especially Annabella's, which I'm going to read you now and let you see it and screenshot it, pause it if you want, but it seems like they're letters to a judge to get Sean's felony record expunged so that he can travel again. My heart's racing right now. I'm going to read this. I'm like so upset. Okay, let's go. Here it is if you just want to pause it real quick. Okay, I guess part 42 is just going to be what I posted. I just tried reading her support letter and it doesn't fit in the rest of this part, so I'm going to do it on the next part, part 43. Thanks, guys. Part 43 of Don't Say Schwarzenegger. This is a continuance of part 42 because I didn't have time to read the character letter of support written by Annabella Nicole Driz for Sean Driz that I discovered in the past several months. And just a reminder, as I mentioned in the previous part, this letter of support for Sean Driz seems to have been written either immediately before or immediately after our civil trial in 2021, where the defendants lost and the jury unanimously awarded us the largest PTSD settlement of all time, which has not been paid, not 1 cent. And it looks like this letter, it's usually they're written for a criminal, like where they're asking the judge to, hey, be lenient, like Mila Kunis and Ashton Kutcher did for Danny Masterson, like, hey, he doesn't grape that many people, just a few, you know, if you could go easy on him and give him a lenient sentence, like that kind of stuff. So this was crazy because this letter of support and the other ones that I have that I'm not going to go over yet, one of them is actually dated in 2021 or another one, it's very clear that this was around the civil trial time, and it seems to me that they're trying to get Sean Driz's felony record expunged so that he can travel. Okay, so here we go. Okay, Annabella's letter is to Judge Hanasono, who I've never even heard of until I got my hands on this document. I had to look him up, and apparently he is a superior court judge in LA in Department 117, and he presides over the felony trial calendar. Shaking right now. Judge Hanasono, I'm reaching out today on behalf of my cousin Sean Driz. Growing up, I was an only child. Technically, that is. While I did not have any biological brothers or sisters, I indeed had a brother. I did indeed have a brother. My cousin Sean. Sean was someone that was always older, wiser, taller, cooler, someone that I looked up to and always wanted to be like. Someone that was always looking out for me, always protecting me, always messing with me, always including me, always comforting me. Someone that was always there for me like a brother would be. When I woke up one morning in 2015, I had no idea the person I knew and loved was about to have their life forever changed. Join the club. In the wake of the events that transpired that night, I've seen my cousin go through experiences I would never wish upon anyone. Aside from the legal consequences that my cousin would face, his life as he knew it would never again be the same. Throughout the past few years, I've seen Sean grow up at an unprecedented speed. She clearly didn't go to the preliminary hearing or the civil trial in 2021, where Sean laughed out loud as our injuries were being described. So awesome. Great job, Annabella. Notice how they support them secretly, but never publicly. Going from someone who seemingly had it all, the friends, family, love, financial support, career aspirations, Sean was left with nothing. He drove a Rolls-Royce Phantom to one of the probation violation hearings at the airport court, and then he got moved in to live in a luxury home with Christina Schwarzenegger in 2017, where she started paying all of his bills. But sure, and I have enough pictures of him on like the Kennedy sailboat, and okay. When someone hits rock bottom, the way in which they rise tells you everything about them. Instead of wallowing in the misery or allowing the situation to tear him apart, Sean rose from the ground with humility, remorse, determination, and gratitude. Even when his life was a shell of what it once was, Sean continued on his quest to be better each new day. On top of doing the work on himself to grow and evolve, Sean never stopped showing up for those who count on him. People say that life moves fast and when it rains, it pours. Well, it's safe to say it's been pouring for Sean for a while now. He has not had an easy go the past few years, even without including this situation of my skull being broken in half and my brother's stomach being kicked in so bad his intestines had to be removed, and the third plaintiff having loss of hearing in one ear permanently. Both of his parents have been separately hospitalized while battling cancer. Side note, I'm going to give you a little bit of information that I'm not going to go into detail right now, but Maurice Driz, Sean's father, pretty much got caught faking throat cancer during the 2021 civil trial. And the judge called him out, and he took off his bandage and he didn't wear it to court one day and forgot about it when he was supposedly wearing it because he had like a surgery or something, and it was the tannest, smoothest skincare ad you've ever seen, and the judge pointed that out. So, and Sean went along with it. You know, oh, he's really tired from the, you know, whatever. Slap in the face to every single cancer survivor and everybody who's had to have a family or member or loved one go through it. I'm like shaking right now. His sister hasn't left the house in years given her dark depression struggles. I wonder what that's like. While going through his own financial hardship, again, wonder what that's like. He's still given the little he has to his family as they simultaneously struggle. I want to struggle like them because it's a different struggle than I've been having, man. And yet my cousin puts a smile on each day and tries. Sean tries to be better. Sean tries to turn his life around amidst obstacle after obstacle. Sean tries to remain positive and hopeful while overcoming hardships. Sean has never stopped trying, and with that, Sean has succeeded. Growing up, my last name was something I took a lot of pride in. Not only did it have a unique ring to it, but I shared it with those I loved and looked up to the most. After the incident in 2015, I struggled to keep the pride I grew up feeling. I struggled not to Google my name in the headlines that shook me to my core. What headlines? I have done everything in my life, sent hundreds of DMs, emails, called every person, ally, politician, journalist over 9 years. And everybody can clearly see that the media has looked away. So I don't know what headlines she's talking about. And the fact that she even said headlines that shook me to my core, that part seems to be taken from my impact statement. Breathe, okay. I struggled not to think of what others might think of my family. However, over the years, that embarrassment that I once felt has turned back into feelings of pride and honor. It's interesting because on Facebook, she goes by Annabella Nicole, and a follower showed me that she did go by Annabella Driz on TikTok a few months ago, around the time I started my series, and then suddenly changed it to Annabella. So not that proud, I guess. Like I said, the way in which someone rises from the ashes tells you more about them than why they fell in the first place. It's an attempt at unaliving, that's kind of a big deal, but whatever. Seeing how my cousin has handled a terrible situation and only allowed it to better him has been inspiring, to say the least. I am proud to be Sean Driz's cousin. I am proud to share the same last name. I am proud to know him, and I am grateful to love him. I pray that Sean will get a fresh slate. I know that he is deserving and you will not regret it. Sean has learned. He has paid the price and he is ready for a second chance. Thank you for your time and consideration, Annabella Driz. Let's talk about this second page because there's a lot going on here. Wow. So when she says, I pray Sean will get a fresh slate, that was kind of what almost every single other letter of support said about Sean. So that's what leads me to think, are they trying to get his record expunged? And a couple of them even said, because for work reasons, blah, blah, blah. It's not work reasons. We know his work, resume. It's so that you can travel. I looked up all the countries around the world that you can't travel to if you have a felony record or something serious, and it's a lot. It's a lot. So I'm having a feeling it's more that reason. And the second thing is where she says, he has paid the price of his actions. The other letters also said the same thing. So let's show you something. Okay, so let's show you how Sean has paid the price. July 29th of 2021 was when we had the verdict of the largest PTSD settlement ever. And a quick little summary is I was awarded about $20 million. And that means all 4 defendants are responsible for getting the entire sum of that paid to just me. I'm not even talking yet about the other 2 plaintiffs. So just me. Punitive, and that ADMDSDWJ, that's the initials of each of the defendants. I was awarded $2.3 million by the jury for what Sean did to me just for punitive damages alone. So you add that together, and altogether, I was awarded about $35 million. If you add in the other 2 plaintiffs and their civil and punitive damages, which Sean owes both of them, numbers huge, it equals about $82 million. Now, every year it goes unpaid, 10% is added, and it is now this month, July 29th, it'll be $106,034,633 that Sean has not paid. That's the price. And then here, real quick, yeah, it's just a little, that's just what Sean owes me in total punitive damages, about 10 million. So there you go, everyone. There you go, Jessica. There you go, followers. There you go, Annabella. He has not paid the price whatsoever. And I can't wait to get into more details about the civil trial and how humble Sean is. Thanks, everyone. Part 44 of Don't Say Schwarzenegger. In this part, I'm going to be covering Maurice Drizz's 2018 deposition. I also wanted to say thank you so much, everybody, for checking in and your patience and everything, because I took 2 weeks off from my series because reading impact statements it kind of just knocks me to the floor, especially reading, a misleading impact statement, I guess you could call it, a character letter that I read in my previous part that Annabella Drizz wrote for Sean Drizz, where she paints the defendants as the victims. It kind of it threw me off reading it on camera. So thank you, everybody, for being patient with me. So right off the bat in the depositions, the attorneys ask Maurice if he's ever been deposed before. And he says yes, like one other time in 2016, so 2 years before this deposition. And he said it was dismissed. Now that's interesting because during this time was when the entire lawsuit, the other lawsuit that Alberto and Maurice Drizz were being sued for schmexual battery of an underage girl, which they lost. So I'm wondering when he says it's dismissed, if he's talking about that deposition from that case, because if he's referring to that, then, well, that's perjury. Next, he goes over the basic stuff. He and his brother Alberto were born in Argentina, but they moved in their early teens, I think, to the United States, and they both attended Beverly Hills High School. Next, Maurice talks about his work resume between high school and 2012 when he began working with Blaze Pizza. And he says that he owned a company called Lucky Knits. And I looked it up, and Lucky Knits, it's a company that does fabric dyeing, apparel manufacturing, knitting, and laundry services, which I thought was ironic. A Drizz, laundering things. Maurice also talks about a company that he worked for, his dad's company, and it's called, according to him, it's called Drizz Knitting Mills. So apparently he's been in the knitting industry. These guys that have been charged with GBI felonies, get caught with illegal white powder and a stolen loaded pew-pew. They're in the knitting industry. Next, Maurice is asked about his living situation. And remember, they're claiming to be broke and indigent. And so he says that after the night in 2015 where we almost lost our lives, he says that he moved into a condo that his parents owned. And he refuses to answer any questions about the sale of said condo. When he's asked about his current address, refuses to answer that question as well. And he says, "You can send me all those questions by mail and I will answer. You've been doing that very well." He's got such a weird, aggressive, passive-aggressive tone throughout the entire deposition, by the way. So then we're going to talk about Peter Corral. He is the uncle of Adam Corral, who owns The Nice Guy, where this whole incident happened, where there was weird fake bills that were handed over to Robert Shapiro, given during the criminal preliminary hearing, just weird, shady stuff happening. But Peter Corral, so remember, he's the guy, he used to own 7 For All Mankind jeans, and I Googled it, and he sold it in the last decade or something like that for $775 million. So he's basically pretty much a billionaire, and he's partners with the Drizzes. And Maurice says that he's been friends with Peter for about 30 plus years. They grew up together, they're partners, all that stuff. So Peter, we're definitely keeping an eye on, because when this all happened, you can't be an owner of a Blaze Pizza franchise location if you're a felon, convicted felon, which all the Drizzes are. So they sold about 11 locations, which each one should, if you're selling it, it should be about $1 to $1.5 million each. And when they had to get rid of these, because they can't be felon owners and because they have to prepare to pay all their victims, they sold all of those locations. No, not for $11 to $15 million, which you would think. They sold the entire thing to Peter Corral for about $110,000. So really, really, really shady stuff that this man's name's all over it. So Maurice says that he actually says under oath that he was not necessarily fired by Blaze Pizza, which is interesting. Blaze Pizza, if you'd like to answer and explain all this and how all of these franchise locations were sold for pennies, pretty much, That's a really, really, really big question that Blaze Pizza needs to answer publicly, along with an apology. So Maurice then says, and I quote, "We told Peter what happened." This is like when right after the incident happened. He says, "We told Corral what happened. He was satisfied with our answer. He was okay with it." Also under oath, Maurice says that Peter Corral was present at their birthday dinner the night in 2015, and they claim that he wasn't at the Nice Guy, so can't be a witness. Next, Maurice is asked about one of the other defendants in the case, one of the men who is on the security footage doing horrific things. And this is William Aubrey Jolson. And I haven't gone into detail about him much, and I will in the next part, but his identity was hidden for 2-3 years after the incident, hidden by all the defendants, his best friends. And he was allowed to skip the entire criminal part and skip the statute of limitations and being charged with attempted unaliving, being charged with like all of those charges. So he was able to skip that, but he definitely owes us millions for the civil. And Maurice Driz is asked about William Jolson, and he says, "I like him very much." I'm going to get into so much crazy stuff about this guy soon, so just buckle up. Next, Maurice was asked who was present at the Nice Guy where the incident happened that night. And he names his son, Sean Driz, and one of Sean's best friends, William Jolson. He also names Alex Derville, who is now an attorney in Los Angeles. Maurice also names a man here in the center of this picture named Jimmy Esbag. I found a lot of stuff about them, by the way. Jimmy likes to post a lot of pictures of his Rolls Royces and his private jet that has his initials on the side. They do business together. Maurice also names another witness. He says that this was his friend that came with him that night, Serena Singh. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, and I don't care. But look how old she is, and, you know, she came as the friend of Maurice. And if you remember in my previous parts, where the LAPD told us that the Drizzes, they were able to get their cell phone numbers so fast is because they had caught them, found out through a madam that night of their birthday, the Drizzes were staying at a brothel type place in Bel Air, a place that had been busted for that by the cops many times. We were told by the LAPD. This is crazy. Maurice then says under oath that he and his team, Shapiro, whoever, that they have, he says, "We have a statement from Serena of what she saw, and he offers to give it to my attorneys." It turned out later we proved he was lying, that there was no statement. So I'm working on getting my attorneys to, I'm pushing and pushing and pushing to get them to start filing perjury charges against the, you know, the dozens and dozens and dozens of lies that I've caught so far. But he claims that she had a statement that was totally saying the defendants, you know, were good people, whatever type of thing, were innocent. And there was never a statement from Serena Singh. Let me remind you also that Maurice says, and I quote, "She watched the argument, the thing that started with the valet, that started the entire, you know, melee of attempted unalivings, and she was never deposed." Then Maurice starts to describe his injuries, which sound very similar to the ones that I actually had in real life. He says that his face was broken in 2 places, but he didn't go and get medical help, and they never called the cops or anything. And that he never saw his son, Sean Driz, fighting with the TMZ paparazzi, which they were all in the same area. They totally saw it. Maurice also claims that he was hit by a mysterious anonymous puncher that kind of just came out of the shadows, and that he was on the ground for a minute, dizzy and bleeding, kind of like what I actually was. Maurice also referred to us, the plaintiffs, who had, you know, many, many, many broken bones, intestines removed in an emergency surgery. I had a traumatic brain injury. Another plaintiff had permanent loss of hearing in one side of his head. He calls us, and I quote, "the so-called victims." Maurice also claimed that he never struck anyone, which would go with the altered transcripts that I discovered from the preliminary hearing, where my star witness described in detail about a woman, Anne Green, being pummeled while she was unconscious on the ground, and he tried to pull Maurice off of my body. And those statements were changed in the transcript later on, and the notes were stolen and destroyed, whatever, one of the two or both. But he pretty much, the story that they're going is he never hit anybody. Oh, and then he also said that there was only 4 of them and 16 of us. So our group of 4 and their group of 16, suddenly the numbers switched. They literally just stealing our entire narrative and story. And, using it as their own. Okay, I'm going to continue this for one more part. Part 45 of Don't Say Schwarzenegger. This is the continuance of Maurice Drizz's 2018 deposition. So Maurice is then being shown the frame-by-frame slow-mo footage of the surveillance video showing the attempted unalivings of his whole group of friends and family committing all these crimes. And he's the only person out of everyone that was deposed that was like, nope, I don't recognize anyone on these videos, even though everybody pointed themselves out and then pointed out their friends and family, and like Alex Derville and Alyssa Arnold, everybody was able to do that because it's very clear footage. And he actually said he didn't recognize his son, he didn't recognize anyone, and he said, damn, I wish I could see the face. Maurice then says that the only time he's ever met me was in court. He says, I never met her, and that his first time seeing me was in court, despite the star witness saying and testifying that he pulled him off my unconscious body. Maurice then goes on to say that despite them being, they're the victims, that we were the attackers, that I was just running around like, blah. He says that they never called the police, and he put blame on the nice guy bar for the entire incident. He's then shown a picture of his own son, Sean Drizz, and he doesn't recognize him either. This is a picture I pulled off their Instagram in the weeks following the incident in 2015. This is directly off of Maurice Drizz's Instagram. And by the way, I think the picture is still up today. And as you can see, it's on his thing, happy birthday to me, and it says April 18th, 2015. So he posted it like that night the next day. He perjured himself again in this deposition, and he said that, no, he didn't post that photo. Maurice Drizz also claimed to have spent almost $500,000 to Robert Shapiro to defend him. Maurice then goes into detail again about the Drizz knitting mills, which, by the way, I Googled it, and the closest thing I could find was something called DRITZ, not spelled Drizz, knitting mills. So it's very weird. A lot of their businesses, like Immigration America, the law firm that Sean Drizz claimed to have worked for in under oath, there's nothing on that like that online. So all these big businesses, they seem to be not real, maybe more perjury. But he says that he worked at Drizz knitting mills for years with a man named Gerard Guez, and that Maurice was in charge of the knitting division. Does anybody believe any of this? Because next in the deposition, he was asked how he was paid by Blaze Pizza. And he says, I won't answer that. And by the way, there's been no repercussions for refusing to answer vital questions and refusing to hand over phone records, refusing to hand over tax records that were ordered to the court and everything. Nope, they just didn't. Maurice then talks about this, non-existent witness statement that Serena Singe gave to Robert Shapiro after the incident. And he says that Serena will say that Maurice Drizz was the first one to get knocked out because he was the victim. Again, more perjury. Next, Maurice says that Robert Shapiro collected about 10 to 12 witness statements from their group of friends right after the incident happened, that he did it in about 30 to 45 days after it happened in April of 2015. Not one of those was produced. So more perjury on Maurice. And then at this point in the deposition, Sean Drizz, who was present, by the way, like off camera, he interrupts the deposition to tell jokes. So that was appropriate. And then after this happens, and this is not the first time it'll happen, wait till I get to the civil trial, but as Maurice is being deposed, he kind of gets caught up in the things that he's saying, and he exclaims, overruled! And the attorneys had to stop and be like, you can't say that. That's not, oh, Jesus, this isn't how this works. So then we talk about Peter Corral again, the business partner in Blaze Pizza who accepted millions of dollars worth of these locations for just over $100,000, which is not legal. Maurice said that right after this incident happened, and he told Peter what had happened, and Peter accepted it according to Maurice. He said that Peter responded and said, is there anything I can do to help you? Which he clearly did. Legally, not so sure. Okay, we're at the very end of this. Maurice then talks about, because, we're like, you need to hand over your phone records, and they never did, with zero repercussions in the 9 years. But he's like, yeah, I was with Verizon and AT&T. I have those cell phone providers, never handed them over. Then more questions are asked, and then Maurice feels the need to mention not once, 2, 3, but 4 times to say that his brother Alberto is heavier, weighs more than him. So weird. And then after that, Sean Driz interrupts the deposition 2 times. They get used to this, by the way. It's like they have no rules, entitlement. It's disgusting. And then at the very end of this deposition, Maurice says, I received a phone call from the sheriff's office that I had to come to the LAPD, which we were sitting there, as I talked about in a previous part. We were all sitting there, the plaintiffs and our friends were sitting there present for a phone call that the head of the police department, I forget his name, Lieutenant Yearwood, called him and pretended that they weren't in trouble and was like, oh, there was an incident. Did you happen to see a young lady be attacked? And he was like, nope, it was a very calm, peaceful night. Oh, and by the way, Robert Shapiro is my attorney. I can't hear you. And he hung up. Nobody told him to come down to the LAPD, yet 45 minutes later after that phone call, Shapiro showed up with all the defendants, like with him at the LAPD to get arrested, get booked and all that stuff, and then pay their really tiny bail, which was a whole other scandal. But it seems as though maybe there was somebody inside the LAPD that gave them the heads up, gave Shapiro a heads up so that he could do this and not have an embarrassing arrest at their homes. So that was the end of Maurice Driz's 2018 deposition. It won't be his last. I'm getting closer and closer to the 2021 civil trial, which is going to take like, I don't even know, 5 to 10 parts or something, but it's going to be the wildest part. And before that, I have to cover intimidation, hacking, surveillance, all of the side stuff that has been happening behind the scenes to me. So thank you guys so much again for being so patient in the checkups and all that stuff these last couple of weeks. I really, really appreciate it. I'm back. Welcome to part 46 of Don't Say Schwarzenegger. For this part, I'm going to be covering another defendant who I haven't mentioned as much as the Drizzes for most of my series because his identity was kept secret from us for the first 3-4 years after the incident happened. And that is William Aubrey Jolson. He was one of the younger men that was caught on the surveillance footage in part of the attempted unalivings. And he was able to skip out on all criminal charges because his identity was kept hidden by the defendants until after the statute of limitations ran out, which was 2 years, we were told. So let's talk about him. We're going to talk about his 2019 deposition. So William Jolson is from the Beverly Hills, Bel Air area, and he was best friends with Sean Driz at the time of the incident. And as far as evidence shows, throughout these last 9 years, has always been best friends with him, despite them trying to create a different narrative. We'll get to that. William Jolson, he was born in 1990, so he's about 34 right now. He went to a boarding school in Connecticut called South Kent Prep, which was $80,000 a year. And then he went to Loyola Marymount, where he studied history. I also just want to point out real quick that Maria Hall at this time was repping the 3 Drizzes during the civil litigation and all that stuff, and she was present during this deposition. She works with Robert Shapiro, and I might actually do an entire part just on her and her ethics and what the little things that she was pulling. We'll get to that. This is an attorney named Louis Adelson of the Costell and Adelson Law Corporation in Santa Monica. He was representing William Jolson during his 2019 deposition, and there's going to be some key points I'm going to read you, and I'm just going to preface it and just let you know that at the civil trial a couple years later, William Jolson admitted under oath on the stand that Louis Adelson instructed him to lie about certain parts to help his defense. And the judge was even like, oh, I'm going to report this then. This is crazy. I'm going to report Louis Adelson to the state bar. That judge was removed right after she said that. We'll get to that. So it turns out William Jolson owns a company called Tong. That's got an exclamation mark for some reason. But he owns this company. He has one partner, one employee, and he doesn't pay for his office space because the office space is in a building that his dad owns. William Jolson also said that he works at a company called the Bedford Corporate Housing. Now, if you Google that and you look it up, it's owned by his dad and I think it's Elliot Jolson. And I think that's him on the top left there. But his father owns pretty much all, like a ton of corporate housing and luxury housing all over LA. Like when I was Googling it, I was like, oh my gosh, I recognize that building. I recognize that building. So there's a lot of money in this family to afford, Louis Adelson and other attorneys like this. I also wanted to make a note. I've been meaning to say this for like 40 parts of my series. You know, I'm not sitting here like talking down on anybody who comes from wealth or anyone that's privileged enough to come from a family that has resources, money, connections. You know, every parent wants the best for their kid. I get that. Like, I have a problem with people that have everything at their fingertips and then turn out to be horrific people, awful people, like violent people, terrible to servers and waiters, terrible to people that can't help them, which is all the defendants in my case. You know, like there's so many people that come, excuse me, from privileged backgrounds that add to our culture, add to community, are good people. Like Daniel Levy is one of my favorite, you know, like all these Nepo people that came from, it's not even Nepo, that's a bad word because they actually earned it. They're disciplined, they're so talented, like Daniel Levy from Schitt's Creek. Willow Smith, like insanely talented, and she's obviously the daughter of Will Smith and Jada Pinkett. And Mariska Hargitay, I didn't even realize till recently that she comes from a really interesting background. Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Like, there's people that are clearly talented and add to other people's lives in their own ways and everything, just not the people in my case. Okay, so back to his deposition. So at one point, we had found out about the use of the illegal white powder, obviously, that the Drizzes, all three Drizzes, got caught with on felony probation at their home and didn't get in trouble really for. And so William Jolson was asked about it in his deposition, and Lewis Adelson, his attorney, immediately was like, don't answer anything about that. So he didn't. And then he starts the narrative on the record of saying, oh, well, I'm not friends with Sean Drizz anymore. And it's like, I actually beg to differ. Next, William Jolson in the deposition talks about Maurice Drizz, that's Sean's father. And he calls him a quote-unquote frequent drinker. And then he says, I had heard that Maurice may have been on, hugs. Begins with D. I don't even know if I can say that, whatever. In previous years. He had heard this from someone's mom who dated Maurice Drizz. And then he says that Alberto has the same demeanor, that they both are like that. Jolson then proceeds to say that he's never been in a fight previous to this incident, which is interesting because the LAPD told us about a police report from prior years where he got in a pretty bad fight with like bouncers or something. I don't know what the deal was, but he wasn't a protector in the situation. We'll just say that much. So, perjury. Another thing that I found out and had to bring to the table, and it was talked about in our civil trial a couple years later, was, every month or so I would look up all their names online and look up if they had arrests, if anything had happened. And I discovered that about a month or two before this deposition in early 2019, that a woman, his girlfriend, had been granted a TRO, a temporary restraining order against him for abuse. What we're talking about here is a pattern, and this guy just keeps getting away with everything. I also discovered that the judge in that case, who I haven't talked about the judge yet or whatever, but the judge in that case was extremely lenient, and like the details of what happened, like taking the girl's dog, putting his hands on her, not letting her leave and call the cops, like really, really, really dark stuff. This whole group has so much in common with each other. But anyways, the judge, named Judge Monica Bachner, who handled it, really lenient. And guess who was the replacement judge after the civil trial when our amazing first judge was removed after demanding to see all of their tax files and all that stuff? Judge Monica Bachner. When Jolson was asked about who was present at the Nice Guy Bar the night of this incident in 2015, he named off obviously all the Drizzes who were convicted and found guilty, blah, blah, blah. And he also named off, who I've mentioned before, Alyssa Arnold and her boyfriend at the time, Alex Derville, who's an attorney in LA now, and a guy named Lauren Braun Diamant, who was never subpoenaed. Now, there's really one of the most interesting points of his deposition that I found was that William Jolson said that there were 3 paparazzi present, which is interesting because this whole time we had only known of 2 paparazzi present. That's Robert Sirachi and Jacob Castellan, who were both TMZ employees. Now, this is really interesting because if there's a 3rd TMZ paparazzi that was present, his name was never given. He was never part of any of the criminal or civil suits. So it's a mystery. But, a lot of weird inconsistencies happened with the other 2 TMZ paparazzi who changed their story throughout time that those stories changed into stories that helped the defense. Also, Jolson said that that night, yes, he did see me unconscious on the ground. And if you remember from the photos and stuff, I didn't look alive. It was extremely bad injuries and everything. And yes, he admitted he didn't try to render aid. And he also said that Alberto Driz told him and his friends that he made contact with Anne, that Alberto made contact with me, knocked me out unconscious. So you can pause this and read it if you want, but this is very important. It's going to come up down the line. William Jolson said, because it's on video, you can see him pretty much stomping a lifeless body on the ground, which was my brother in the surveillance footage. And he says multiple times in his deposition that what you're seeing is not what you're seeing. Your eyes are deceiving you pretty much. That he went to go kick this body on the ground, and at the very last second, so he wound his leg up and it was coming down, and at the very last second, he thought in his head, you know what? The victim is neutralized. I don't need to stomp him now. So he, at the very last second, decided not to do it, even though that's not what the video shows. But that was the narrative that he was pushing, and his attorney, Louis Adelson, was like, yes, that's what he means. That's what he means. He will admit 2 years later on the stand that Louis Adelson advised him to lie under oath. And lastly, William Jolson said that he just thought that me and my brother and our friends were paparazzi and not just regular people. So I thought I'd post this photo shoot where I'm holding a camera from years ago, and maybe that's what he saw and he thought it was a paparazzi. Anyways, thanks for coming, guys. Next part coming soon.